Do we have Cónal Creedon in the audience? Cónal, are you there? Earth calling Cónal? No, maybe he hasn't managed to log on. It's the joys of internet.
No.
Are you there, Cónal?
I am indeed. But,
oh, wonderful. There you are.
We know it's Fiona.
Oh, right. Okay. Messing with our heads. Welcome, Cónal. You're going to share one of your readings with us.
I just say enjoying is probably the wrong word, but I'm really enjoying this, and I'm finding it really engaging and informative, and I suppose in a funny way it informs everything that I start to know, which is ultra informative. Just very briefly about myself, I've lived in this street here I suppose for over 100 years. My family moved in here, and it's downtown in Cork City. And just going with the other speakers were saying, trauma is an interesting one, because sometimes it seems to me that it's about objective and subjective, how it's perceived, perception, and because, for example, when developers come down the street, they always call it the inner city, and it doesn't resonate with us at all. We're sort of, no, this is downtown, which is a very different place. There's a sense here that we live in a rural village. Like people from around here, if they're like the main street in Cork is just about 2 minutes that direction, and it's across Patrick's Bridge. People here, we sort of say we're going into Cork as if it's a different world, we perceive that we're a small rural village. At the top of the street, there is, I suppose, a drive to make it a place, it's a very popular part of town. A lot of restaurants and good restaurants, and it's but there's been a sense that it's going to be a drive to call it the Elizabeth or the Victorian Quarter. And like around here, we always say, well, this is the Dickensian Quarter, because it's I suppose it's a bit more reflective of what down here sort of is. I'm going to read a very brief little piece. I suppose my work, I've written a number of novels, a bunch of plays, and I make documentaries and things like that. And I suppose up to now, I would have always said, so what's your book about? What are plays about? I'd always say the human condition. And I start to realize now, having listened to this, that my books are about people who are traumatized, really. And I figure maybe in lesser or greater ways, all of us are still, because I was even talking to Jane yesterday maybe, and I was saying to her that, something like, well, we live and we learn. And we live and we learn is sort of a very euphemistic way of saying we'll deal with the next trauma when it comes at us. And because I was saying, I want to stop living and learning. I want to stop learning. I would just want to start living now, and I want to get rid of the next hurdle I have to jump over, right? But so I'm going to give this a read. Basically, I went off to get this. Is a photograph I want to show you, right? This is a photograph of my family, right? So this is my father. It's my mother over there, my Uncle John, and that's my Auntie Greta, and the rest then are their children. That's me on my father's knee. So there's a lot of us, and I suppose because of that, the memory. So even though when I say I'm living here for over 100 years, it's because there's a very collective memory still in this house. Like there's a frying pan, I guess, that was probably used back before the Boer War. And it's there in the press, and I don't feel that energy from it. Like I don't feel that I'm getting the Boer War back at me, but there is a sense that everything here has a place since before I came here, and it'll be here long after I go, unless some developer comes and turns into inner city. So I give this a read. Basically, it's from a novel called Passion Play, and Passion Play it's the story. It's a very brief little piece. I'm going to read the last chapter, the last paragraph. Basically, it's about a guy called Pluto, Paul O'Toole. He lives in Bedsettland. He's 33. It's Good Friday, and basically his life has been one trauma after another, and he's facing eviction and a bunch of other things. Now, the odd thing is his perspective of his life doesn't seem that traumatic, even though from the outset, I think that's often the way. It's like I can see people, and maybe even this street, that I can see, my God, things aren't going good there, but they may not have that perception of their own lives. That they're still dealing with what's in front of them. And I think, as Anne Buckley was saying, it's only just before that, it's only when you realize the trauma you've been through that you can actually maybe get out of it. Otherwise, you just go through this cycle. But so Pluto, it's Good Friday, he's 33, facing eviction. His life has been fairly traumatic, really, but minor traumas. And in that he places the big traumas, for example, a girlfriend that he loved dearly, who really would never stick with him because he was just impossible, right? But he didn't see the big issues that the reader will see. And he decides to take his own life. Because he realizes that to achieve greatness, in other words, to live forever, like Moses or like Elvis or like Jesus, you have to die, because as long as you're alive, you're in the process of dying. And that's the logic he makes, that to achieve greatness, and there was nothing there for him. He was facing the very bad scenario coming down the track at him, and he decides to take his own life. And all he has in his flat really is some easy single cheese, is like a quarter bottle of Jameson and 2 hits of LSD. So he consumes all them because he hates the idea of waste. His mother, when she killed herself, she went into the river, she put her shoes on the bench before she went in, because for the same reason, she didn't want to waste her good shoes. Like, her shoes were more important than she was. And he dies, but his brain is tripping from the LSD, and that's what the book is. It's the journey to the next life, and ultimately he reaches what one would call heaven. And I'll just show you one more picture, if I can. It's a very small extract, but I don't know, can you see this? Well, that's a picture from Bell's Field, where this little extract is set, and that's the north side of Cork City. That's Shandon, that's the North Cathedral. That's where he finds himself. And I think the thesis of the story really is that heaven and hell are more or less the same place. It's just about perspective, or how your life is within that place. And so I'm going to just read it. He has met the woman of his life and the woman of his love, and everything is perfect. And everybody he meets, they're all dead, and they keep saying, "I thought you were dead." And he's saying, "Yeah, I thought you were dead." And he still has no idea that he's actually dead. He thinks he's alive, or his brain thinks he's alive. I take Yvette by the hand, and on we make our way to the brow of Patrick's Hill. There we stop, look back down into the goldfish bowl. We don't turn to salt. Yvette tugs my hand and leads the way. We climb the wall at Bell's Field. There before us is a world framed by the salt and pepper cellars, the belfries of St. Anne's and the North Cathedral. My eyes embrace the beautiful north side, laid out before me like a kitchen table at Christmas time, cram-packed with dainties and delights, stretching as far as the eye can see, vanishing over the hill at Blarney Street and Knocknaheeny. Breathe it in, I say. We walk through the knee-high meadow, nestled down into the sheltered hollow. There we're sprawled there barefoot on the grassy ridge above the city, saying nothing. Bolts of pleasure and pain as my memories travel across Brewery Valley, stopping off along the way at the North Monastery, Eason's Hill, Murphy's Stack, landlocked Powraddy Harbour, past each laneway, step and steeple, from the Bishop's Palace right over to the dome of City Hall, all the way back to Redemption Road and over the city to the spiked towers of Holy Trinity, St. Finbarr's and the green tops of St. Francis. In the distance, the county hall scrapes clouds, picking up the gold of a dying sun. I gaze out westward, out along the beautiful Lee Valley to the Carrigrahan Strait. There like a last gasp at life, a setting sun sends flames of reds and orange and yellow licking high up into the sky. Ballincollig's burning, I say. My city is a royal town, dressed up in crimsons and gold. In the distance, through the mists of time and coal smoke, I hear the cry of an echo boy, the sound of men walking and whistling their way home from work to the red city of Granabraher, the chimes of an ice cream van across on Spangle Hill, the bells of some cathedral or other, the yelps of children from Roach's buildings playing ball along the road. And as I say goodbye to this city of pain, it occurs to me that there's a harmony of movement and colour and sound. Everything is as one. The aromatic blending of Murphy's Brewery, Linehan's Sweet Factory, Donnelly's Bakery. Yvette snuggles into me. This could be heaven, I whisper. Could be, she smiles. Could be. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Cónal. That was wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing your writing with us. Next up, we have Dr. Clíona ní Cheallaigh, and Clíona is going to talk to us a little bit about ACEs, homelessness and inclusion health. And just to say, we've had a slight kind of time lag, which was inevitable with the many wonderful contributors that we have. So if I can ask people to try and keep to the allotted time that I've given you, that would be really wonderful. So welcome, Dr. Clíona ní Cheallaigh.
Thanks so much, Jane, and I'm delighted to be asked to talk, and I'm really delighted that this event is happening. I think it's such important work that you're doing, bringing everybody together, so thank you very much. So my name is Clíona. I'm a doctor. I work in a hospital in St. James's, and I suppose in some ways it's probably a little bit unusual as a doctor to be really interested in trauma, psychological trauma-informed care and ACEs. And so I might just explain a little bit about why that is. You've already heard from Austin, so he's already explained everything. But I suppose something that James's is in a very socioeconomically deprived part of town. It's surrounded by lots of flats where there are many generations of, intergenerational trauma and poverty and various difficulties that people have had to face in their lives. And the patients that we work with would very much be from that surrounding area. I work in HIV medicine a lot, so HIV drugs are amazing and they work really well. And so normally, if somebody gets diagnosed on time and takes their meds, that's great. We don't see them. They just go off and have a lovely, healthy, long life, doing all the things that anybody could want to do. But we have a relatively small proportion of people who didn't come into clinic, didn't take their tablets, and who get really sick with kind of varying forms of AIDS and other associated complications. So it's a very stark example of the difference, and the human suffering, the preventable human suffering that somebody experiences. And so I got really interested in trying to understand what was going on, because the medication is free and, we think we're lovely and friendly and happy to see the patients anytime and to try and understand. And I think that's really how I came to understand the huge impact that adversity in childhood has on people's sense of self, on, I suppose, how they feel, what they feel they can ask from life or what they can expect, and on how they interpret interpersonal interactions. And I think it's heartbreaking to see people who really don't feel that they are worth good health or worth looking after. Because from the outside looking in, we can see all these wonderful characteristics that they have. And so we work in a very trauma-informed way, really trying to focus on that and to help them feel, at least in our setting, that they are loved, because love and relationship are the foundation of everything and the foundation of our safety as humans, and to support them to engage in their care. But really, what I've learned is that unless you recognize and address the effect that adversity has in childhood has on people's behaviours as adults, you're really never going to be able to do what you want to do for those who need it the most. And so I really strongly feel that all services, whether it's housing, prisons, education, healthcare, all of those, we need to be aware of the harm that childhood adversity has on people, and what our role is in trying to make them feel safe, making them feel that they have control, and making them feel that they're worth looking after and investing in, because for us, we can see that worth so clearly. So that's it, and I was even under time.
Wow, Clíona, that's pretty amazing. Extra points for you there. Thank you so much for your wonderful, again, heart-centered way of speaking about people. I think it's like night and day compared to the shaming, blaming language that is the mainstream way of talking about people, particularly with addiction problems.
Absolutely. And it's terrible to see that, because it puts them into the bad person category. And there, I mean, I don't believe there is such a thing as bad people, but certainly people who have used addiction to cope with a very, very, very challenging life should not be shamed and blamed. They need extra hugs if they want them.
If they want them, indeed. Thank you so much, Dr. Clíona ní Cheallaigh, for your input. It was tremendous. And next up, I'm really pleased to welcome Chief Superintendent Colette Quinn, who is a member of An Garda Síochána and works specifically with her brief in relation to young people. So Chief Superintendent Colette Quinn, can you tell us about offending behaviour, trauma and policing, please?
Well, hello everybody, and thanks Jane again for inviting me along. And certainly everybody else's contribution, and particularly Anne's story, and indeed others as well, tell me exactly that the legal system needs to change, and the legal system needs to understand trauma and work from a trauma-informed basis. And hopefully my long involvement in the diversion programme, and I'll tell you a bit about that as we go on, and I'll keep to the 5 minutes for sure. And I'm just reminded, and even thinking about making this presentation today, so I'm just reminded about, you know, in 1924, the precursor to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child in Geneva, there was a statement, and it says, mankind owes to the child the best that it can give. And that's us. And that's us in the police, and that's us, everybody else that's on this room today. And moving on from that, then the convention itself talked in terms of, you know, a number of pillars about non-discrimination, and very much to the conversation that we're having about everybody's valuable and everybody deserves a chance. Devotion to the best interest of the child, and hearing the stories from people who have lived this journey and tried to address and deal with trauma in their own lives. It all started when they were children and nobody was there to support them or help them. The right to life, survival and development, all of that is part and parcel of what we're all about. And then respect for the views of the child, and how often have we heard about that and promoting that. And again, that's not today or yesterday. We in Ireland signed up to the convention in 1992, and we committed to this idea of a child-friendly justice system. And out of that came the Children's Act. And, you know, my own view, because I was 10 years as the director of the programme, you know, there was always this sort of balancing act between welfare and justice as a model. And for me, any child, and particularly children with a lot of trauma in their lives, I always saw them as victims as much as offenders. In fact, I mean, they were more of a victim than an offender, and I often wish the system could have supported us more along that journey. But I suppose in relation to the diversion programme itself, we have about 10,000 referrals, or children referred to the programme every year. And about 4,000 of those children require additional supports. And many of them are experiencing trauma to varying degrees. And I suppose over my lifetime, I have identified perhaps 3 categories of children that are referred to us. There are those that who have good family support, or one good adult in their life. So it's generally a once-off referral. But there's trauma in that in itself, because, you know, you get the guards knocking on your door. You know, that's a traumatic experience for any parent and any child. And it may be a small thing, or it could be something more significant, but there's a trauma involved in that. And that's to one end, I suppose, of the spectrum. Then you have children who live in communities where crime is embedded, and their communities, and oftentimes indeed family members, either siblings or indeed parents or guardians, are actually involved in a criminal environment or criminal network. And that in itself brings all of the trauma that we've heard about earlier on today as well. And then the third category that I think often too gets overlooked is the children that are in care of the state. And these children definitely experience trauma at numerous levels throughout their lives. So on the basis that over the years, we certainly in the diversion programme and our juvenile liaison officers on the ground recognise that through our work that a great many children involved in the criminal justice system had been exposed to trauma. And there's a research indeed in the area backed up our concerns. So what we learned, and I'll tell you about how we actually came to find out our own, I suppose, our own experience in it. That children in the justice system are probably approximately three times more adverse childhood experiences than those of the average population, and that they are 4 times more likely to have experienced 4 ACEs or more. So from a delivery service point of view, and again, we're starting in a small cohort of people, a very important cohort of people, we wanted to get an understanding of well informed our juvenile liaison officers are and were, and then those youth workers that work with us as well, where the impact of trauma and experiences were part of the children they engaged in. So we a couple of years ago, we embarked on an exploratory study, and we partnered with Youth Rise, Quality Matters and UCC, and we conducted a study on early life trauma and the implications for youth diversion projects, the Garda youth diversion projects. The findings there were that we actually didn't go into children, we went into the case files more so than the actual children themselves, but we interviewed the youth workers and the juvenile liaison officers, and we actually determined the ACE profile from that, and we found that the profile closely monitored that of the homeless population, probation and substance abuse services. So overall, the findings highlighted high rates of trauma in this population and the importance of effective interventions, engagement and diversion strategies. So we then spoke to we tried to get a sense of what our juvenile liaison officers, am I still on, or because I just see my screen has probably gone blank? Am I still on? Hello?
Yeah, it's still on.
Yeah, okay, all right, that's fine, because my screen seems to have just gone blank here. Okay, so overall, the findings showed high rates of trauma in the population, as I said, and the importance of having an effective intervention, engagement and diversionary strategies. So the study also found that JLOs and youth workers had this knowledge or understanding intuitively as they went about their day-to-day work with young people. And it found that the approach supported the principles of trauma-informed care, even though they had no specific training themselves in the area. The emphasis on, I suppose, things like building relationships and rapport between young people and the professionals was found to be supportive, safe, trustful, and respectful. So those were positive things for us to get out of the study, albeit that we're a small group working specifically with young people, and I think there's a bigger picture there that we need to promote and you know, I suppose being involved in this type of an approach, and with you, Jane, in particular, you know, hopefully through the rep we'll be able to grow that. So I suppose the study highlighted a number of opportunities for improvement, and definitely we brought it to the creation of the Youth Justice Strategy to 2021 to 2027, where the whole idea is that there's no wrong door. So I'm hoping that particular approach can embrace the whole idea of trauma and trauma-informed care. Another useful, I suppose, development is that the Department of Justice in its criminal justice sectorial strategy 2021 to 2023 has identified the delivery of trauma-informed services at every stage of the criminal justice system as a key pillar in building workforce capacity into the future. So I suppose from a research point of view and from a work point of view, I think there's work to be done at the wider environmental organizational level within ourselves, but also that push and pull of a group of people externally looking in and asking and demanding, and particularly those that have experienced it, and we've heard about them from them today. And the other part too that I find is my last little point on this, and quite a big point really, but we've heard a lot in policing about victim-led policing. And, you know, we have this notion of a victim as somebody who, you know, perhaps is in the wrong place at the wrong time and has her, you know, house burgled or whatever. But I don't see it like that. We have, I mean, the victims that we're dealing with, by and large, the supposedly offenders are victims in communities, and particularly communities that we've heard about earlier on. And I think there's something around a conversation about who is the victim and what is happening to the victim from a trauma perspective that drives the behaviour. And I'm going back to Anne Buckley again, but like if we wanted to sort of, write it all out in a timeline, I think Anne's story reflects it in a very real and personal way. So from my point of view, I think, not taking this to the next level would be a mistake, a huge mistake. It's a huge opportunity. And insofar as my office is concerned, we're wholeheartedly behind the idea of where we experience it every day, a trauma-involved environment for people who are experiencing it. And I think if we could work together and push the different, I suppose it really is now about who are going to be our supporters, and that's at probably at a government level and at a strategy level, to make sure that this is taken seriously, embedded in practice, and that then the supports are provided to the people who are trying to deliver it as well. So that's my sense of it all.
Thank you so much, Colette. I found that very, very interesting and enjoyable. And from our recent interactions with REP, where I'm working as a youth justice worker, I know what a great advocate you are for partnership approaches and kind of a holistic, sensitive approach, which is excellent. I'd just like to show you all, seeing that Cónal was sharing photos. This is a bronze casting that my husband made of my daughter's foot when she was only a week old. And just to make the point, I showed it to David Stanton when he was the minister drafting the youth justice strategy, to make the point that people who grow up and do bad, harmful things were this size once. They were this tiny and vulnerable once. And we sometimes forget that. So I think having people like Chief Superintendent Colette Quinn energizing the Garda Síochána, and it's music to my ears that there'll be trauma training for all criminal justice professionals. That's so important. But I also think we all, again, have a role to play in stepping into our own power as citizens, and also keeping pressure on if things don't progress in a timely manner, and not just in the criminal justice system, but in relation to addiction treatment, in relation to all manner of social inequities that we've discussed today. So moving on, I'd like to welcome Sharon Mpofu, please, if Sharon is here with us. And Sharon is going to share some of her own experiences of the direct provision system and accessing asylum in this country. So welcome, Sharon.
Thank you so much, Jane. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sharon Mpofu. I'm originally from Zimbabwe in Bulawayo. I am an asylum seeker and international protection applicant who is currently residing in a direct provision setting. And I must reiterate that direct provision is very traumatic, based on the fact that you'll be coming from a traumatic place where you are running away from conflict, you're running away from abuse, you're running away from persecution, dehumanization, degrading, and you come here seeking protection in a country which upholds the human rights of women and children. And at the same time, you come to a place and you feel like you are in a prison, though you are not in and it's like a dignified prison whereby you are there in your own clothes, not in a prison uniform. You can't decide things for yourself. A lot of people are going through trauma. They're going through depression, they're going through anxiety because of the way we are being treated, at times the way we are being addressed as individuals. We are not taken seriously. At times we are being shunned away, we are being called names. And, at the end of the day, it adds up to more of the trauma that you're already suffering. And there's a very big gap and a lack in dealing with traumatic issues in these direct provision centers, whereby if the general public or the Irish community can come to an understanding that we as international protection applicants are not here to try and feed off the government. We are also trying to get help, also trying to assist the government and the country of Ireland in trying to build the country, because we've got a lot of qualified people. We've got doctors, we've got nurses, we've got social workers, we've got healthcare assistants, we've got nurses, we've got teachers. But because of the stereotype and the red tape, because of being in the asylum system, it blocks us in also trying to assist, to also showing, to show our resilience, to show that we can be of great help in building this economy, in building the island wealth. But I think in my own perception, if maybe, I don't know if I can say, I would like maybe to challenge the Irish community, to challenge some of the people in the government or in this organization to maybe just take 1 or 3 days and go and live in a direct provision. And then maybe you will understand when we say direct provision is very traumatic, is very stressful. It's kind of like degrading as well, because at times we are adults, but we are treated like kids. You get shouted on it in front of your own kids. You get spoken to like a person who doesn't think. And that on its own, it's very traumatic. And we've had a lot of cases of people committing suicide in direct provision, but the numbers are not being publicized out there. We get threatened if we try and voice out. We get threatened with being called calling the Gardaí, and instead we are supposed to feel protected by the Gardaí. But also in another concept, in African countries, when a police is called on you, you feel intimidated, you feel scared because of the way that they treat people, with the way that they brutalize, the way that they interrogate or torture people. So when somebody comes to you and say, I'm going to call the Gardaí for you, regardless that the Gardaí are there, they are wanting to help, but just because they're in a uniform, you feel traumatized. You have to relieve all the trauma that you try to run away. And also when you go to the Department of Justice for the asylum process, being asked to relieve or to try and talk about the trauma that you're trying to block away from yourself, trying to and forge ahead, get something positive to do in your life. And somebody will tell you, no, you're lying, there's nothing like that. It's another thing that makes you feel vulnerable. It makes you feel unwanted. It makes you feel less of a human being. Whereas we are humans like everybody else, regardless of color, creed, race, religion. We are all humans. We are all a human race. And it feels so frustrating at times, even for kids. You are uprooted from one center to another, and all this direction provision center are in the middle of nowhere. They are in the middle of nowhere. Even if you get a chance to find a job, you don't have access to transport. We can't apply for driver's license. We can't do anything. You are stuck in the middle of nowhere. Today you are in Portlish. Tomorrow you are in Kerry in the middle of nowhere. Kids have to be the new child at school. That also traumatizes a child at school to say, I'm always a new kid at school. I get picked on. I get segregated on. I get to be called names. It also that it's traumatic to kids, and kids don't get counseling. We don't have access to counselors. They'll just say we've got numbers, just call the number, but we don't know the process. Other people don't understand English, can't speak English, or even converse or make even a statement in English. So how am I going to get help if I don't understand the language, if I don't know where to go, if I'm not shown the right way, the right channel to say, follow this channel, and then the things will be easier for you. And I'm speaking here as Sharon. I am a member of the Movement of Asylum Seekers, which is MASI, which was formed in 2014 by asylum seekers it was in Kinsale, in Limerick, when they also were tired about the direct provision system. So we rely on ourselves as asylum seekers for other asylum seekers. So we are appealing to all you guys to please try and understand, walk in our shoes. Then maybe you will understand when we say this direct provision needs to be abolished. This direct provision is not viable for a normal human being to go through. At times, the food that we are being served, you have a baby, a 3-month-old baby, you are given cereal, or you're just given potatoes to give a child to a 3-month-old baby. You are given toast to a 3-month-old baby. You're just given soup or rice that has been cooked 3 days ago. They say you must eat that. And also at times when we want to access healthcare, it's difficult to access a healthcare. Housing, it's difficult. Once they know that you're an asylum seeker, you're under HAP, nobody wants to give you accommodation. It becomes another challenge, and you get stuck in the system that you want to get out of. You want to be of great help to the country, to yourself, and try and get a sense of belonging, a sense of being part of a community. Because I am here to learn from you. You are to learn from me. We can really help each other as a nation, as a country, irregardless of where I am from, irregardless of my skin color. I can be of a great asset. Integration, unity, and being together as one goes a really long way. And I must say, this also the process of asylum seeker on its own, it's a dread. You wait 2 years without even getting an interview. After you interview, you have to wait another year or two to get a response. And that on its own, it's also another traumatic experience. You don't know whether you're coming or going. At the end of the day, after waiting for 2-3 years, the next thing, you get a deportation order. You don't even know where to go, what to do. That's why people end up committing suicide. And people don't understand this. They'll tell us you're ungrateful. How can you come here and then you kill yourself? But they do not understand where we've been, what we've gone through for us to be here. It's not that we wanted to be here by choice, but it's circumstances that we are going through or we're coming from. And to be quite honest, yes, the government of Ireland is helping us by protecting us for now, but I think there needs to be a proper channel to say, if I come and seek for assistance, instead of keeping me in a direct provision, process my application in a short period of time, then I work and pay my taxes. That will help the country. I can come, maybe I'm business-minded, I've got business ideas that can bring employment into Ireland, but because my hands are tied because of the system, I can't do anything. So I'm appealing, like I say to you, and I'm challenging you guys. I don't know if you can, maybe take a day or 2 or 3, come and stay, experience the life in direct provision, or take a day or 2, go and sleep on the street as homeless people and feel what they go through on a day-to-day basis. Then if you walk in my shoes, you will understand what I'm getting at. I hope you guys put something out of that. And thank you so much for listening to me. And thank you for offering me the opportunity to speak to you. Thank you.
Sharon, thank you so much for sharing your experiences, which are pretty stark and horrendous. I think, again, as a mother, and this might sound vaguely ridiculous, but given your invitation to us to spend some nights in direct provision, I certainly think it's something that maybe policymakers might want to try. But I spent a couple of nights in a travel lodge with my husband and children a few years ago, and it was not very comfortable. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, if I was in this type of accommodation for a month or 6 months or 2 years, what might my health and well-being be like? What kind of a parent might I be? Where would my energy be directed? So I welcome your challenge to us to see what we can do to support you. And thank you again, Sharon, for being here with us today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And also, I forgot to mention that also try to understand that you're living on 38 euros a week.
Yes.
And you are living in a room, a 3x3 room, maybe with 4 kids, 2 kids, and you're expected to live in that one room. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Again, we're a little bit behind time, but if you can stay with us, please do. We just have 4 more contributors, and they're all very worth hearing. So your heads will probably be spinning after all of this, but hopefully in a good way, and a way that you want to join together and work together for a safer, healthier, better Ireland. Donal Clifford is up next, who I'd invite to talk about working with trauma survivors. Welcome, Donal.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks for having me on. Great listening. Kind of, I suppose, anxiety provoking at some stages. But so thanks for having me. I qualify myself. So you asked me on, I suppose, to talk about working with trauma survivors, people with trauma. I'm a psychotherapist originally. an addiction counsellor, and I suppose more recently specialising in sexual addictions. And I suppose the reason that I fell into this role was my own life journey, being, I suppose, recovering from addictions myself, from alcohol and drugs. Found that after a number of years being in recovery, that things hadn't really changed. Like, it was grand, the outside world looked okay, I had a job, was kind of getting on with life, was having a family, getting married, doing all that stuff. But internally, there was a lot missing, and I hadn't dealt with it. So it was kind of looking at, I suppose, what happened internally, as opposed to kind of just taking away a substance or a behavior from somebody and saying, that's it, job done. It's not job done, because some of the other speakers there spoke about ACEs and all that. I suppose for a person to heal, they have to recover to some degree from ACEs. And ACEs, is trauma. It's and trauma to me is very simple. It's an injury or a wound. And I suppose trauma is very much part of our lives. It is part of life, of the world we live in today. If somebody, I suppose the majority of people today will suffer a trauma at some stage in their life. And I suppose what can kind of help or hinder the repair of a trauma is the attachment primarily to a caregiver, kind of their early attachment experiences. So I suppose following on from my addiction training, I went into psychotherapy, which is more about healing the soul of the person, as opposed to taking away a substance or a behavior. And that's kind of the core of my work today, is working with people more on a connected level, as opposed to working with, so I'd have a lot of people coming to me with addictions, and my focus is never on the addiction. It can't be on the addiction, because the addiction, as I think we all know at this stage, is a coping mechanism. It's a symptom of something else. So I suppose the way I begin my work is by saying, look, let's not put our focus on the alcohol or the drugs or the behavior or whatever it is. Let's focus on the relationship and building a working alliance and having a safe space for the client. And I find that really works. I think having just a connectedness with somebody is probably, for me, the best way of working in. And then when they have that safe space and they have a sense of being okay and understanding, and you spoke about shame, and you can reduce shame, then the behavior or the addiction, whatever it is, can be removed, and they'll do it at their own pace. It will happen at their own pace, because they're coming to therapy for something, and that's pretty much the way I work. And I suppose people there were talking about care and taking care, and I have an acronym for it, and it's consistency. So if you're looking to do something, there has to be a consistency in it. It can't be a hit and miss. I'll be here one day, because that for some people can be re-traumatizing. It's like a parent is there and then they're not there. It's like a parent or a child who has an alcoholic parent. The parent is drinking one week and then not drinking for 6 months, but the child doesn't have that awareness. They always know in the back of their mind that they can drink again, or they can act out or be violent again. So it's always there. So it's about a consistency. No matter what you're developing, there has to be a consistency in it. Accessibility to services, that's CA, responsiveness, being responsive and being attuned primarily to the child, but also to the adult, that piece of attunement, and an emotional connectedness. And I think that's what each one of us are looking for in all of our relationships. It's having an emotional connectedness, not just a kind of a surface level where we'll talk about things and shoot the breeze and it's nice weather and let's have a chat, and they're looking for a bit more than that. So that's kind of the foundation of my work, working with people with trauma and trauma survivors. So I cut it short, Jane.
Donal, thank you so much. It was wonderful to hear from you and to have you share some of those reflections. Again, attunement is so important, and the idea of earning a secure attachment with someone, in this case a therapist, in order to maybe build a bit more safety and trust to go out into the world and view other people not as constant threats. So thank you for sharing your important work. that you're doing in Cork with a wide range of people. Joe Power, I'd like to welcome you now. You must be half exhausted. I'm sure we all are a little bit tired. Joe, you're going to tell us a little bit about the community and the value of restorative practice. So welcome, Joe.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks for the invite, and thanks everyone for staying on. I'll keep it short as well. So yes, really enjoying all the contributions so far, and just say a little bit about myself. I worked 18 years in residential childcare, so I suppose the contributions from Aoife there kind of really resonated with me there. And also Colette talking about the disproportionate amount of young people in care, kind of interacting with the Gardaí, so they were kind of coming to mind there, and really, I suppose, kind of looking back, I mean, I wish I kind of knew then what I know now about trauma-informed restorative practices as well. So when I talk about restorative practices, I'm going to kind of what I mean that is trauma-informed restorative practices. Unfortunately, at the minute, most restorative practices, even though it's really good, don't get me wrong, it's not inherently trauma-informed. Although, just to say, I mean, it's quite topical. I'm a restorative practice trainer for 3 years, and having a meeting tomorrow with a number of other trainers through CDI, the Childhood Development Initiative in Tallaght, and it's kind of one of the things on our agenda is to bring that trauma-informed approach to the RP. So look, a definition, I suppose, quick about RP for anyone who mightn't know what it is. There's different definitions around, but the one I like is that it's a philosophy and a set of tools that builds relationships and respond to conflict and harm. Okay, so this idea is in there of being reactive when something happens, and it was kind of born out of criminal justice, restorative justice, but it's also very much proactive. Okay, so this continuum, if you like, of reactive and proactive. But the question I'd like to pose today, and it kind of goes beyond restorative practices, so hopefully it's of benefit to everyone in their own work, is where is restorative practice used? Okay, and by where I don't mean is it in schools or in youth work settings or in families, criminal justice, or any number of areas, even hospitals, because it can be used in all those areas. It is used in all those areas. I mean, anywhere you have people and relationships, there's a need to build relationships, and there's a need to respond to conflict and harm. But when I say kind of where is it used, I suppose what I'm thinking is this idea of, the proactive, reactive river, if you like. And I'm going to try and marry an idea from a book called Upstream, but by Dan Heath. He writes that he gives, I haven't read the book, so you don't need to have read the book, but I've heard him talk about it in podcasts. And he gives this example of children falling in a river, and this couple and having to kind of fish young children out of the river. Okay, and then someone else falls in the river, and this idea of continuously kind of firefighting, if you like, and that probably might resonate with a lot of people in their work. But his idea, the central idea in the book, and it fits with restorative practices. Why not go upstream? Why not be proactive? As much as you do need to fish young people out of the river, and we understand the trauma issues behind it, there's a need to be proactive and go upstream. So generally I do most of my work with schools, education settings, and that's where I get the email or the call, something is going wrong, conflict resolution skills needed, and RP will bring that. But then they get to learn about circle time and other tools. And just one quote from a circle that I facilitated, I demonstrated circles back pre-COVID. And this is a quote from an 11-year-old boy, 5th class primary school in Limerick. And at the end of maybe a 20-minute talk, I mean, circle time is just people getting a chance to share. I just asked, how was a circle for you today? And he said, I like the circle because nobody has to be lonely anymore. Okay. And I think that's just a great example of a proactive strategy, moving upstream, building relationships, improving young people's connections, their well-being, their mental health. Just one example. I could give more examples, but this idea of moving upstream. So, I mean, very quickly, if you continue that and you move further upstream, it's very difficult to bring restorative practices into schools, changing cultures. It is being done. It does work, but it's difficult work. But if you get up further upstream, the inevitable conclusion is train every teacher in teacher training college, okay? And I'm not saying there isn't bits being done, but train them properly, okay? And then you kind of replace all the actors here, remove schools and bring in youth workers, train every youth worker properly. Because, you know, at the minute, you know, I'm doing lots of training and people are saying, oh, if only I knew this, or it was properly explained. Train every guard. And again, I'm not exactly sure what's being done, but train everyone properly, train every nurse properly in trauma-informed care and restorative practices, because they are they do fit really, really well together. Train every doctor, train every college student. I mean, this isn't a big time issue. This is like a day, 2 days in your college career, or in your secondary. Doesn't even have to be college. Secondary school students. I mean, potentially you create, and this might sound idealistic, but why not aim high? You know, you can change in 15 years if every Leaving Cert student coming out, every college graduate coming out had a day or 2 days of trauma-informed practice. You know, go upstream, get into the policy making, the area you're in, Jane, and further again. So I just had this idea of we're all along the river, if you like, and it's not that people further upstream are more important.
Yeah,
I mean, if anything, it's the people at the front line that are, you know, the real heroes. But I mean, how much nicer would it be for them to think that, you know, people upstream are doing more and more and more. So I might just wrap it up there to move on to Kitty. So thanks again, Jane.
Thank you so much, Joe. And I love that quote from the young boy. I like the circle because nobody has to be lonely anymore. I mean, that's profound. That tells us an awful lot about, because at least he was only 11, you know, and he had this lovely encounter at that stage in his life. People get to their 70s and have never had those healing encounters. So I agree with you that we need actually a mass education movement. So thank you for that point. I'd like to welcome now our final contributor, Kitty Holland. Kitty, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today to tell us about the role of the media. And you do some wonderful stories that often impact on or shedding light on trauma and its various manifestations. So thank you for being here.
Sure. I'll fly through my thoughts as fast as I can. And I suppose there's two things I'd bring to this. It'd be my experience of kind of covering issues around the, you know, the results of trauma, but also maybe then what the media could be doing a bit better in response to it. I'll go back at about, it was about 15 years ago, I was at a conference which really had a huge impact on me. It was on infant mental health. And there was a presenter there. And I had never heard this talk about infant mental health before. And he was from Britain, and he was talking about how a baby's brain, a tiny baby's brain, has all these synapses, all these millions and millions and millions of synapses, and how it has to use some and get rid of others because there's too many of them. So it'll keep the ones that it uses, and it will discard the ones it doesn't need. And so how important it is for an infant's environment in terms of the brain that then goes into childhood and adulthood. And if a baby is surrounded by responsive caregivers who you know, attend to their needs, respond when they're crying, feed them, cuddle them, keep them warm and make them feel safe, they will keep all those synapses and see the world through that prism. Whereas if it's a baby who is experiencing a mother or a primary caregiver who is neglectful for whatever reason, whether there's addiction, depression, domestic violence, if they're scared, if they're experiencing violence themselves, experiencing hunger, not having their needs responded to, that they will go into adulthood and childhood with all those synapses in place, expecting the world to be a threatening place. And it really blew me away at the time. And I suppose it's kind of de rigueur now. We know this stuff, and as I think trauma-informed care and approaches to the world is becoming a lot more mainstream, but I don't think mainstream enough. And you do see the kind of the judgment that is doled out to people and some of the people who I'd be interviewing. And I mean, I suppose it feels so obvious to me now that, you know, if you've got a really challenging childhood, you're gonna enter adulthood and experience adulthood in a more defensive, angry, difficult way. And I suppose some of the ways, some of the places I've seen that are, you know, interviewing people in homelessness, people in addiction, people experiencing food poverty and those kind of things. And you see it heartbreakingly sometimes when you're seeing children in the environment where you're doing the interviews. And one example, I suppose, that kind of struck me at the time, and I didn't kind of tease it out in the piece I wrote, but I was thinking about it afterwards. I was doing a piece about food poverty, and I went to a food bank in Ballyfermot, and I went back then home to with the two mothers who I met, and one mother and the children in her had the mother clearly had I think she'd had a really difficult childhood. She was really, really depressed. She talked about her childhood. She talked about how her mother had been in prison, so she talked to me about her difficult childhood, and you could see it in the home around her. The place was really untidy. The floors were not intact. The children, which she took no pleasure and seemed to take no pleasure in anything in her life. She did. And next door, same food bank, same income. The house was pristine. There were bowls of potpourri around, and the mother talked to me about her own mother and how her mother had taught her. And she said, my mother always said, if you have a sack of potatoes and a tray of eggs, you'll always have a dinner. And she just seemed so on top of it all, and she seemed to be able to handle it all. And that kind of just really struck me as an example of how very similar circumstances, but very different coping mechanisms, and how their childhoods had. And it was only after I'd written the piece that I really started to think about that. But I see it all the time, you know, and how adverse childhoods spill into adult lives. And then I suppose just thinking about the role of the media I think we need to look at that more and ask people more about their childhoods when we're talking about their adulthoods. I mean, and I'm just thinking that listening to this all today, that we have a role to play in that. But I also feel that the media, particularly in daily newspapers and in, you know, daily newscasts, are so busy that you actors, you guys out there working in this, in all your different roles, you need to be talking about trauma all the time and because once that becomes the jargon and becomes part of the lingo, it does change the way people think and change the way people report and change the way people judge. And I think we all have a job of work to do in talking about trauma and getting that into the mainstream, and so that people understand and to judge less, I suppose. That's as quick as I could.
Kitty, thank you so much. That was wonderful, I think, because this is an ongoing a piece of work for all of us. There's no end point really, and we do all absolutely, I firmly believe, have a role to play. And my invitation to everyone really was to do what you can, use the influence that you have, speak to people like Kitty, speak to people like Colette, people in positions of power who can shift the narrative. But we all have power, is my point, even if we don't know it. And so I thank you all for being here today. I'm delighted now, having done it all and having been tossing and turning all night, kind of going, am I ridiculous for undertaking this? I'm delighted now that I did, because I think it was energizing. It was great to bring the multiple perspectives together to show just how interconnected things that we might like to box away into discrete little silos are. We all are interconnected, and we are far stronger together really than we are separate. So hopefully there'll be an increased effort to have more collaboration, to build relationships with people who maybe don't seem like natural allies some of the time, because we all, I think it's safe to say, would prefer the world to be a safer, healthier, more connected, equitable place. I think that's fair enough. Just how we get there isn't always so clear. So thank you for being here. We're over time by a little bit, but thank you so much. And we'll send out a recording to people. We'll send out the survey link as well, if you could fill it in. Any feedback is useful to us. And I'd like to thank again Fergal and Kathleen and the Family Resource Centre National Forum for upgrading their account and letting me use it, and to the Lord Mayor and all the wonderful speakers for being here, taking time out of their busy lives and sharing their insights and perspectives. Thanks all. Bye bye now. Take care.